Greetings, my name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes. And today, we're going to get a little crafty and build a way to make magic items.
Crafting systems have been implemented into many D&D games, whether they be homebrew or from third-party content or the guide in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. But some of them work really well, some of them leave a lot to be desired. And today we are going to talk about some of the ideas we've cooked up to build a better crafting system.
We're going to salvage what we can from the rules that are already in place and rebuild these rules and forge something anew. Something that is better, stronger, faster, more powerful, more intuitive, and that really fits how we play our games of Dungeons & Dragons. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get rolling.
Now, before we jump into our crafting system, there's a reason why we're in the midst of homebrewing our own crafting system, and that is because our new book, Monsters of Drakenheim, is coming to Kickstarter in just a week or two, and we are going to be implementing a brand new crafting system into that book, as well as a ton of brand new monsters inspired by our world of Drakenheim, which is a lot of dark fantasy, cosmic horror, faction intrigue, and all of those juicy bits. Now we're bringing to life all the monsters that are going to exist in that world in one book.
The world of Drakenheim is filled with eldritch terror, dark fantasy, and faction conflict. And Kelly and I have brewed up over 150 new monsters from the deepest, darkest recesses of our internal nightmares and torment to share with the world and inflict upon Drakenheim. These include more mutated monstrosities that stalk the ruins of Drakenheim, alchemical horrors produced by dark apothecaries in terrible laboratories, and alien creatures that stalk the space between worlds.
As well as refining these monsters so that they have a ton of new abilities, introduce new conditions to inflict on the players, and have new ways to engage in combat, we've also written a bunch of lore for all of the monsters. Each section of monsters is going to come complete with lore about how it fits into the world of Drakenheim, but each monster itself is complete with a description, lore on how it fits into the world, as well as rollable options for your players discovering information about the monster, combat tactics to use the monster at your table, and if it's relevant, some of the monsters even have personality traits that you can use to help roleplay them.
We wanted to make monsters that are more than just a bag of hit points, but are also more interesting than just their stats. Something that you could build a really cool story and adventure about and really expand our world of Drakenheim, or using your own homebrew campaigns. You can follow the link below to follow the Kickstarter page now, or you can also get on our special VIP Discord, where until the campaign launches, we're going to be sharing some really cool previews from the monsters and magic items and the new rules in the book itself, as well as get an opportunity to get a really cool set of physical dice if you pledge to get the book. Check it out, and we can't wait to see you in the Kickstarter.
But let's focus today on the one aspect that we've been working really hard at for the last while, and that is a brand new crafting system that we're implementing in our new book. Crafting has been a part of Dungeons & Dragons in every edition, and it's a well-loved part of the game. A lot of people have written their own homebrew rules, or we've seen a lot of third-party content involving crafting systems that allow you to take parts from around the world, design your own bespoke magic items, and really spend a lot of the downtime and gold that you accumulate in the game to build magic items. There's some really great options out there. Xanathar's Guide to Everything has expanded on the idea of what you can do with downtime with some really neat ideas on how to craft your own items. Lou Tavern did a book called Heliana's Guide to Monster Hunting, which implemented a vast and deep crafting system that really explores the many ways that a group of players can spend a lot of time in their game building brand new items. And if that's your cup of tea, That's awesome. These are really great systems. Heliana's guide is for a really in-depth approach to crafting. Xanathar's guide gives some basic ideas for crafting, but we wanted to actually take a slightly different approach and look at a more action-forward crafting system.
Because this is where the problems with magic item crafting often come into play in tabletop role-playing games, and especially in D&D, where it feels like we are still stuck in 2001 with the magic item crafting rules from 3rd edition, which leave a lot to be desired, in my opinion. Magic item crafting is often associated as a downtime activity, something that the player characters do between their adventures. And many crafting systems that D&D has had over the years, to actually make a magic item, the player characters have to spend weeks, if not months of time constructing the magic item and spend a ton of gold. And really and truly, I've always had this feeling that magic item crafting is kind of like, well, you get a 50% discount on buying the magic item if you just decide to spend a whole bunch of time doing nothing on your character. Sometimes they involve having to take a feat to craft an item. Sometimes there is an element of a quest or finding a rare component, which is actually the most interesting thing going on with most of these systems. And sometimes in 3rd edition, you actually have to spend XP to craft a magic item in addition to spending gold for it. So the crafting was really, really abstract. And I think that the thing that people wanted to have from crafting is like players like the ability to make custom items, to be able to build the item that they want, as opposed to having to just go shopping for it, which doesn't feel very special, or finding it in the dungeon, which often feels cool, but you don't really get to decide what it is. And I think that's for me, the allure of crafting is that a magic item that a player crafts feels really special. It feels really personal. And it doesn't feel like you bought it in a store, and it feels like you got to choose it as opposed to just finding it randomly.
Some of my favorite aspects of crafting that I've seen, we took a lot of inspiration from some of our favorite video games, actually, like Valheim, The Witcher 3, or Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Although there are elements of those games that we also don't want to include in our D&D games. In Valheim, if you're searching for ore and you have to pick away at ore veins, that can be a pretty monotonous task.
And Valheim is one of the better survival crafting games for not being super grindy. But like, grindy video game style crafting is never going to work in a TTRPG.
No. And so what I do like about crafting, though, is this idea that if you have the cool parts, you can make the cool items. I also love the idea of, for me, it's really cool to imagine that because I slayed a manticore, I get to wear a manticore pelt as my cloak.
Yeah.
And it actually looks like I get to walk into town and people are like, that guy killed a manticore.
Yeah, or that you have a vampiric sword that is bathed in vampire blood, and that's why it restores hit points when you hit people with it, because it is infused with the essence of the monster that was used to create it.
And I think that is what we're taking into our crafting system. Now, again, this is based on how we play D&D. You might be a DM out there who says, I love downtime. My players spend weeks. They'll go on a quest, and then they'll have 3 months before their next quest where I ask them what they want to do. If that's the case, there are crafting systems out there that are going to work amazing for you. At our table, it is hard to find 1 or 2 days of downtime in our adventure.
Yes, and like a week of downtime is something that happens in our game, but not the months that are usually required to make a magic item. To make a potion of greater healing takes a week. And I don't know about you, but my characters guzzle those things down like I guzzle coffee.
The superior healing potion takes 4 weeks to create one.
Yeah.
And yes, those are very unique and special items. When you're at high levels of play and the big bad evil guy is about to march on your town, are you going to spend 4 weeks to make one superior healing potion?
And that's the other thing. Like, I think of campaigns like the Red Hand of Doom, which the Red Hand of Doom felt like a campaign that the players should have been able to craft something to help them against the Hobgoblin army. But because the campaign has this time pressure to it, you can't. You just can't, right? And I think that we've seen a bunch of different ways that has been addressed in a lot of things, but looking at a bunch of different crafting systems, the recurring theme is always downtime. So our first design principle, no downtime. No, it's just not a thing in the system. No gold piece costs either. You don't have to get gold. No gold, no downtime. And I'm going to add another rule. I don't want skill checks.
Skill checks are a part of the game where and I agree where this principle comes from. You are playing a game that involves rolling dice to add random effects. So rolling a dice during a system that you're implementing makes sense.
Yeah.
But crafting items is one of those things that you're going to hate if you collect all the right parts, go to build the item, and then it has some fatal flaw designed into it.
Let's just be honest. Rolling to craft a sword is never going to be as cool or interesting as rolling to attack with that sword. It's boring. I get excited. The most exciting part of crafting is the feeling of accomplishment that comes from, I finally gathered everything and now I am building this cool item that I get to use. That, for me, when I played video games that have crafting system, that's what makes me feel accomplished, is that I just did all this cool stuff. I got all these parts finally. And then you have that like 3-second bar filling up while your character's going tink, tink, tink. And you're like, there it is. Finally, the sword. That's the feeling that I want.
And so as we jump into our crafting system, there's a disclaimer and a few questions that we set out to answer yes to. First, the disclaimer. The disclaimer is that the crafting system that we are designing here is not one that is meant to imply an economic system for the world.
Yes.
Because it doesn't involve downtime, gold, or skill checks. Yes, the rest of the world is probably using downtime, gold, and skill checks to create items. This is a player-focused system that is meant for players who are about going on quests, slaying monsters, collecting parts of those monsters, and building cool items that they will use to continue to slay more monsters.
I think that a lot of crafting systems suffer from this idea that if you make a crafting system, what's going to happen is that the players are going to decide, we're going to go into business, we're going to go out and farm monsters and parts, start making magic items, and we're going to sell them to make a ton of money, and then we're going to use that money to buy more parts and make more magic items and then do a capitalism. And I think what we're going to basically say with this crafting system is that if your players want to do that, do not use these rules.
This is for the already excited group who wants to go on adventures. This is for the adventuring group.
Yes.
And that is what this is designed for.
And so I think that we're not going to worry about breaking the economy of the world or what happens if the players go into business. We're just going to come out right from the gate and say, that's not what this is for. This is not a simulation. This is not, we're not economists, and we never will be. We're game designers, and we want to make something that is cool and fun, not something that we're not going to, instead of having to contort our crafting system so that we don't break the real world economy, we're just going to be upfront and say, it doesn't work. This is not what it's for. And if you've got players that are going to do that, consider another system.
And now, as for the questions that I think our system wants to answer yes to, can you design a crafting system that actually inspires adventure, tells stories, makes epic quests, and drives the characters' narratives, and ends with a rewarding goal that makes the character feel like they accomplished something and have had a personal journey?
And I think that this is where the glimmer of this, the thing that we like about what the rules in Xanathar's have and what Loot Tavern did with Heliana's, is this idea of fighting monsters, taking their body parts, and using those to make cool magic items that tell the story. So that is our core premise. Tell the story of how the item was made, fight cool monsters, but don't involve gold, downtime, and skill checks. We're going to get rid of all that and focus on making this narratively cool concept come to life. So I think this is like the high level sketch that I have. Every magic item has a recipe of 3 to 10 parts of a monster.
I also think the recipes are a little open-ended on how you can find them. You could find them amongst treasure. You find gold and a few recipes for magic items. Rather than rewarding your players with already existing magic items, at early levels, they find recipes.
Yeah, and like depending on how rare and powerful and specific the magic item is, it might be more restrictive. Like maybe if I just want to make a +1 sword, I just need, and I think that we can explore the specifics of how that works later. But this general idea that like the recipes for maybe a +1 sword is really simple and open-ended. But like if we're making the Holy Avenger, it's got to be like
the heart of an angel. Or a demon.
Yeah, like
something like that. Like it's got to be specific.
Yes, it's got to be really. Yeah, you can't just get like there's a legendary magic item that is made using the horns of the Tarask, and that is the only way to make this item, right?
As opposed to a healing potion that might involve just some different ingredients of general quality.
Yeah, and so some items are, and so this means that like it's a bigger quest the more special the item is, which feels right to me.
I also think that when you're talking about the recipes, this could be something that any DM could implement into the economy of their game, in the sense that different shops sell recipes. You go to the alchemist shop and you can buy recipes for potions and maybe scrolls. You go to the blacksmith, they might have a few recipes for some items, but you have to find some pretty special places to find that recipe for the Holy Avenger.
Yeah, so I think we might involve some gold in this idea that you can buy a recipe.
Yeah.
Right? Or maybe you complete a quest for a blacksmith or like a master craftsperson, and they teach you, here's how to make it. Maybe for a high level, that's fine for a low level item, but like maybe you actually need to learn how to make a Holy Avenger from a solar.
Yeah.
Like an angel has to teach you how to build it. Or a dragon teaches you how to make a staff of power.
But we want that end of this to be pretty open-ended and up to DM discretion. All the players obtain recipes is part of the adventure, part of the quest, or however the DM wants to implement.
And maybe we could have a bit of a researching system. Like maybe if you do have like a bunch of different parts, there is some sort of mechanic that does let you research what you could make with them. Ideally not involving dice rolls.
Yeah, so that's something that we're still workshopping. But the first thing that you need is the recipe. So all recipes are going to involve collecting between 4 and 10 parts. And those parts might be very general for some of the lesser items, some uncommon items, or a common health potion. But as you get into the more bespoke items, those will require more unique and bespoke parts. So let's talk about the categories of parts that we have in our system.
What we're going to do is we're going to kill monsters, and instead of taking their stuff, we're going to butcher their bodies and take parts from their bodies.
Yeah.
So when we think about a monster's body, like most monsters are going to have bones. They're going to have organs like their eyes and their tongue and their heart. They're going to have like blood, but some monsters might have, like maybe you can harvest the water of a water elemental, right? Some monsters might have like ash, like I'm imagining like a fire elemental, or like vampire dust. What else?
Well, when we talk about blood, I think our category that we called it is fluid, because it's not just blood. A ooze would have their ooze
right,
fluid.
like just the ooze fluid. So like fluid, bones, organs, which includes like sensory organs and like all the guts.
Then we have ash. We also have natural weapons. This is a pretty broad category. It involves horns, teeth, claws, or various other, we put limbs in there.
Would like a tentacle or a toe fall under this category?
Could be.
I want to do something with troll toes.
Definitely. There are troll toes for sure.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of creatures are going to have hide. Now, hide, again, as a general category, could include skin, but it could also include scales, carapace, bark, steel plates, or any number of other options that are the outside layer of a creature.
Yeah. I think in addition to hide, you also have like fur or hair.
Right, because a lot of creatures are going to have hair or feathers.
Yeah, right. And so you collect, so we've got these 7-8 categories or so. And then when you're harvesting the parts from the monster, we're going to have you write down the category of the part, what it is specifically, and then the monster in its creature type and its challenge rating. Because I think this is the key thing. It's like monsters with a higher challenge rating, you need their parts to make rarer and more powerful items too.
So if you kill a CR7 troll. You would write down, I'm harvesting fluid, blood from a troll, which is a monster type of giant, CR7.
Yeah.
The reason why that's going to be important, one recipe might call for any blood. Another recipe might call for any troll blood. Another recipe might call for any troll blood CR7 or higher, or any blood from a giant creature.
Right. So like we've got this flexibility with the items, I feel, and then all we need to do is kind of give a snapshot in like a little table for every monster of like all the different parts that you could pull from it. Now the question is, so we're a bunch of players. We just killed a troll. How many parts can we take from its body?
We went back and forth on this a lot.
Yeah.
There was the idea of collecting multiple parts, how much time limit there was, all of these sorts of things. And we landed on something that I think really solidifies this as a simplistic system. So the monster parts lose their magical potency after 10 minutes, and each character can take 10 minutes to harvest one part. This is to imply that parts may have been destroyed, damaged, or just are not usable, or that their magic has faded because you took too long to harvest them. In this way, each character that is at the table, each player, gets to harvest one part from a battle. If you kill one troll, each character can harvest a part.
Just the party you're like ripping apart.
And I think the DM gets to have their discretion there. Usually if one player wants to collect an eye and another a bone and another a claw, that's great. If two characters want to collect eyes, I as the DM can be like, yeah, this creature has 2 eyes, so you both get an eye. If 3 characters want to collect troll eyes, I might be like, only 2 of you can collect eyes. So there's a bit of common sense in this.
Yeah.
If you kill a beholder and the whole 6-person party wants to collect eyes, only one person gets to collect the central eye.
On the flip side, if you fought like a dozen harpies and there's still only 4-player characters, you're only going to harvest 4 things. Because I think that this rule of 1 is how we prevent the farming.
It prevents a party of 6 players having 100 magic items at an early level.
Yeah.
The limitation here is if you have 4 players, you're collecting 4 items, which means that you can probably only craft potions and scrolls pretty easily, but the more bespoke magic items, the swords and the armor, are going to take you a few adventures to actually get all the pieces.
Because here's my like back of the napkin math. In most D&D games, you're doing 8 to 12 combat encounters each time the player characters gain a level. If it's a party of 4, that means that the party's going to loot between 32 and 48 monster parts every level.
And I think because of the nature of a recipe, that doesn't necessarily mean they have all the parts for a recipe.
Exactly. They might not find exactly the right parts they need. So I think we have to make potions and scrolls pretty easy to make so that like you could, like, cause I think it would be fine over the course of a level for the party to make like 10 potions or more, but I only want them to really make like 2 or 3 permanent magic items. And so I think that that's where the combination of like, not every recipe you're going to have the perfect match. Maybe you have some leftover items. Maybe you don't find the recipe right away. And, you know, maybe you do a little bit of trading somewhere in there. And I think that we get to the right place. I think another important thing to note when we're looking at the number of encounters where player characters are looting monster parts from is that this is a system about looting parts from monsters. So in an encounter where you're fighting humanoid enemies,
humanoids
you're not going to get
list.
parts from them. So not every encounter is necessarily going to be one where you're going to pull monster parts from. Maybe when you're fighting the humanoids, that's where you loot normal treasure or you find recipes from them. But you're not going to be...
We don't want to get into the whole...
Yeah, we're not going to be using like human blood and skulls and human souls to be making items.
This is about killing monsters.
Yeah.
If you're killing people, that's not part of this crafting system. Of course, that's part of D&D. But we don't want you in the middle of town square being like, oh, got the bandit. Let's no.
Let's go take your liver.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah,
we're not going there.
Yeah,
a vampire liver in the city is fine.
Yeah,
but not.
Yeah.
Anyway, semantics. Now this actually brings me to two other categories that we haven't talked about. We have all the parts that we can collect from the monsters, the components. And I think that it's meant to be both specific and general. This gives you the freedom to be like, a potion requires any blood and any fluid and one ash, and you can make a potion. Whereas the Holy Avenger requires the heart of an angel CR 13 or higher, and the hair of a demon, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Two parts that I think are going to be extra important in this crafting system. We have what's called animus. Animus is essentially the magical essence contained that empowers the item to be magical. So if you collect a bunch of magical monster parts, what makes them work together? An animus does. An animus fuels that magic and allows it all to connect together.
And an animus is not the soul of a monster, but it is kind of that representative of the innate magic that a magical creature has that powers its own abilities. And so we can capture the animus of a dead creature in the moments after its death in an appropriate vessel. In the world of Drakkenheim, these are the delirium crystals because they immediately work. Whereas I imagine in the world of Drakkenheim before, to make a vessel that could capture creatures' animus was actually really hard. But now, because of delirium, you've got a ready source. Of course, you need a bigger delirium crystal for a more powerful monster. And so that's how we balance it.
I do think that you could also use some rare gemstones. Like, I like the idea of collecting a vampire's animus and a ruby.
Yeah, but I think it has to be a special gemstone that speaks to that. So the other kind of like sort of breaking point that the DM has for how many magic items the party gets is how many vessels they find to contain animus and how many recipes they find.
It also plays with it a bit because delirium is the number one sold item in our system, and it's used, and it's also dangerous. So carrying around a bunch of delirium for vessels, you have to decide if you're going to sell it for gold, give it to the factions that you're trying to work with, or use it for vessels.
Yeah, because ultimately I think if I'm playing a game where crafting items is a thing that happens, I think it's pretty reasonable for each player character to be able to craft a new magic item every level. I feel like if we're going to do crafting, we want to do it that often in order for it to feel like an integrated part of the system. And you're going to craft a couple more potions and scrolls than that. And so does this result in characters having more magic items than they might normally have over the course of a campaign? Yes, but because the magic items they craft are corresponding to the rarity of monsters that are appropriate to their tier, you're going to get this thing where the player characters upgrade the items that they make. Maybe we actually have a mechanic in here for like disenchanting your items and then putting them towards the next one.
Yeah.
So from a practical perspective, the player characters are going to be pretty well equipped, but they're never going to have anything that's inappropriate for their level, and they're never going to have more magic items. Like attunement is also going to be the other thing that like clamps this down.
A lot of the magic items we're designing require attunement, which means we do have that limitation built in.
Yeah. So you have more options.
Yeah.
But not necessarily more power.
I always like those video games where like you have to choose your loadout. And it's like you have 20 cool options, but you choose your loadout for this mission. And I don't think there's I like attunement for that.
Yeah.
The last component that we have is what's called trophies. Now, trophies are going to come into play with higher CR monsters or bosses. So, for example, a trophy is going to be a very unique item like the Beholder's Central Eye. Or if you think of like a vampire lord, you might get like the heart of the vampire lord, which is different than a vampire heart.
Yeah.
The heart of a vampire lord might be a specific item required to make the great blade of vampires. And so these items are going to usually be tied to a singular, probably very rare or legendary magic item. And so they imply an entire adventure where you need to go kill a bunch of undead then slay the vampire lord and collect the trophy of the vampire lord's heart to build the epic sword to defeat all vampires.
Yeah, we've talked about how we've got all these components, that the player characters can harvest one component per encounter each. So that's like our flow. But I think the last part of this, I think really comes from my inspiration in games like Valheim and to a lesser extent World of Warcraft. Because I don't think you gather all the components and you're there in the middle of the dungeon. You're not building this in the middle of the dungeon, right? You got to take this to an appropriate workshop to build it. So while you don't have to have downtime, you do have to be in the right place to make something. And so I think that what we're going to add here as the last component is we're going to have workshops, which could be a forge, a laboratory, could be like a Fletcher's workshop or a leather worker's shop. I think we can be evocative with this sort of thing. And I think that we give the forges and the workshops a rarity.
And you can only build items of that rarity or lower at these workshops.
Yes.
And I think that to imply, again, adventure forward, something like a common or uncommon workshop can be found in most towns. You go to the local blacksmith, ask if you can use their forge.
You're good.
And you're good to build uncommon and common items. But you have to go to the great dwarven city to find the rare forge.
Yeah, like it's got a rare workshop would be something that was like in a mage's tower or like in a capital city or something that was like in a grand guild hall of some kind.
Again, I love dwarven forges, but theirs is in the caldera of a volcano, where the great dwarven smith, who was renowned amongst all of the dwarves, crafted the greatest weapons ever known to dwarf kind. And you need to travel there to create the very rare item. What about the legendaries, though?
I think legendary is where we go completely bonkers. And this is where like you need to be in the wizard's workshop that is in the space between worlds or on a planar rift.
On the moon.
Yeah, some kind of like a legendary magic item needs to be born into the world in a legendary location. And I think one idea that we're kind of toying with is like, I really like this idea that when you're making a legendary magic item, that you're bringing such a powerful item into the world that some other powerful entity is going to get mad at you and attack you while you're building the item. So every legendary item, there's actually a combat encounter where you are crafting the item or you have to defend the something as like the climactic moment of creation.
When I think of legendary forges, I think of that scene where Thor builds Stormbreaker and has to literally power it with a sun.
Totally. Yes, exactly. And it's like and then that's where maybe for the legendary items we bring a skill challenge in.
Yeah, or even it might not even need a skill challenge, more just an adventure site.
Yeah.
It's like you need to get the forge that is orbiting a sun working again by powering the sun through a lens.
Yeah.
And as you're trying to turn it on, you're getting attacked by monsters.
That's so cool. And I think that we can even apply that to the lower level forges. One of the things that I think we'll say for the purposes of abstraction, your workshop also has all of like the mundane parts. So I don't want to go out and have my adventurers collecting steel. I don't want to have to go. You don't have to go out leather is the thing that you will collect.
Because hide.
But like
steel, nails.
Or like chopping wood or picking flowers. Like if you're picking the flowers off a plant monster that just tried to eat you, that's one thing. But like, I don't want to do like that grindy like I played World of Warcraft. I did fly mining. I don't want to do that in D&D. Like that's just, no.
This system is all about killing the epic monsters, stealing their epic parts, building epic.
We're not going to grind out a bunch of iron bars here. But what I think you could do is maybe you arrive at the Dwarven Forge and the dwarves say, turns out the iron mine that we got all of our steel from has been overrun by kobolds. So before you use the workshop, go clear out the kobolds.
And that again allows the DM, I think that we're going to put like adventure hooks for forges or for workshops. Workshops will have ideas on where common and uncommon, rare and very rare, and legendary workshops might be, as well as adventure hooks for what might be entailed in unlocking those workshops. Yeah.
So basically what we got here is Go find the recipe. Go get the cool components from monsters. Bring them to a really cool workshop. Bob's your uncle.
And then you make a really cool item.
And you just make it. Like you don't, like, I think maybe we say, like, it takes you a day. Like,
I think it could be done in a long rest.
yeah. I do too.
8 hours.
I think for potions and scrolls, I would even let you do it in a short rest. In fact, we could even say that healing potions and certain scrolls, you could make those in the field. Like, you could actually use your tools.
As long as you have an alchemist kit or like a scribe.
Because I like the idea of like brewing up a potion during a short rest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe we say like common and uncommon could be made during a short rest.
As long as they're, I think potions and scrolls.
Expendable.
Consumable items, but we'll play with that in playtesting and see how that turns out.
Not to toot our own horns too much, but something that ended up happening is after Monty and I created this system, we got to work designing the magic items.
Yeah.
And I think the realization on why this system worked so well is that as we were designing the magic items, the narratives wrote themselves.
Yeah.
It almost felt like as we came up with, story time, Monty came into the studio the other day, and the first words out of his mouth to me, I was just sitting here trying to mind my own business, and Monty storms in and says, "Banshee hair. What can you make with banshee hair?" And that was followed up immediately by, "Could you string a bow with banshee hair?" And then all of a sudden we started talking about the other components that you might want to collect on a quest that involves banshee hair.
Yeah.
And once we had the list of components, we wrote a description of the weapon. And the description was just how those components worked together to create this bow.
So we have this bow that is strung with the hair of a banshee and made using the bones of fairies.
Or dryads.
Yes, dryads. The bones of a dryad bathed in the blood of a vampire.
Within the shaft of the bow is an ectoplasm core that fuels the magic through it from the animus set in the middle that needs to be from a wraith.
Yes, and this bow, combined with so much ethereal and undead power, allows the wielder of the bow to shift into the ethereal plane as they draw back the bow, allowing them to see through walls and shoot spectral ammunition through walls.
There are some limitations, and actually we'll put our draft version of this up on screen right now. So this is the Ghost Sight bow. And the Ghost Sight bow just came from a little inspiration from us looking at the components, the different monsters you might kill, and then creating a magic item using that. And so what I think that means is that DMs could really design their own magic items in this system pretty easily.
Well, then the other point of inspiration that we had was that in real life, a lot of musical instruments are made from bone or ivory or string or hair. And so we were like, what are all the bard items that we could make? What is the heartstring harp that is made using the hair from a fey creature and the ivory from a minotaur, and then infused with elemental power? What does that magic item do? Or the demon skin drum.
Drums are made of skin stretched out over a bone.
So what if it's the skull of a demon with the skin of a demon, of a different demon stretched
over top of it, and you need two other bone drumsticks.
Yes.
And you probably need a bit of leather in there.
Yeah.
And so when you start thinking of these ideas, like what does it take to make a drum? And then you look at your list of components and you say, okay, we need 2 different types of bones. We need skin. And of course, everyone needs an animus.
Yeah.
Then you need leather, which is going to be from the hide of a different creature. And for the fact that it's a demon drum, you could do different types of demons.
So what if we're going super basic? Like, what is making a +1 sword in this system?
So this is where you go less specific. If you're designing a +1 sword, you need an animus, and I think it's any uncommon animus.
Yeah, from any like challenge rating 3 to 5 monster.
Yeah.
Right? And then you need some bones. You need the natural weapon from some kind of creature. I'm imagining like decorating the hilt or the fang. Maybe you also need the leather from a creature to wrap around the grip of whatever the weapon is. And I like this idea that magic weapons have to be doused in some kind of magical fluid.
So like a blood or an ectoplasm.
Or something like that.
But you could literally just make it, you need a fluid.
Bones.
A fluid of bones,
natural weapons,
natural weapon,
leather,
hide,
and an
and
animus.
an animus.
That's it. For
And
just a
so,
generic +1 weapon.
and all of them are CR 4, 5, or higher, or whatever.
For a +1, yeah. And
Yeah.
then we maybe we add another part requirement, like maybe you need elemental dust of some kind for a very rare item, and then for a rare item, and then for a +3 item, maybe add one more thing to the list.
I also think there could be basic rules in here that are simply like, okay, you're creating a +1 blade, but if you also make it an animus that is a challenge rating 10 or higher elemental, you infuse that blade with elemental
That could be cool.
power.
Or we could just do some basic elemental weapons, like make sure that there's more than just a flame tongue.
Yeah.
And a frost brand. For a potion, I'm imagining that a potion needs a fluid, an organ, and an animus. Right?
Pretty simple.
Yes. So like you could make it using vampire blood and troll eyes and mix that up with the animus from a minotaur.
I like the idea that health potions specifically, it's like everybody's got their home recipe for health potions. You know, it's like my grandma makes the best health potions in all the land. Oh yeah, those home cooked health potions aren't anything compared to my home cooked health potions.
Yeah, like it's really open ended. Now, scrolls is another one. Spell scrolls. My idea for this is you can't use paper for a spell scroll. It's got parchment is traditionally made using the skin of animals. So a spell scroll is inscribed on the skin of a monster, and it has to be a monster with a challenge rating twice the spell's level. So
and you need magic blood to inscribe it.
You need blood, and then the animus of another, so magic blood or fluid to be the ink, and then you crush the animus up in the crystal, the delirium crystal, that makes the ink. So it's hide, blood, and an animus.
Yeah.
That's your spell scroll.
So those items are very generic and open-ended. Oh, you collected those, like if you went on a troll hunt, then killed some undead, then fought, I don't know, some harpies. You probably have enough to make a few potions and scrolls because these are generic in their description and maybe a +1 sword. But if you want to make the harpy-winged cloak, then that's going to require a lot of specific parts from harpy.
Exactly. So this allows us. So I think here's the only kettle of fish that we bought ourselves into is I think we're going to have to do a recipe for all the SRD items and probably like a guide to making monster parts for all the SRD monsters. But I feel like, okay, and correct us if I'm wrong, I feel like this gets really intuitive really fast.
It's like when we started explaining it, it sounded complicated even when we were trying to explain it to each other. But once we started looking at it closer, it actually is just really intuitive.
Yeah, I feel like the fact that it's so story driven makes it really clear how to reverse engineer it and use it in your own campaigns. With the key, I think the key to the system is the monster's challenge rating corresponds to the rarity of the item. So tier 1 monsters are uncommon, tier 2 are rare, tier 3 monsters are very rare, tier 4 and up are legendary. I think that it's between 4 and 10 parts needed per item. Player characters get to harvest 1 part each per encounter.
And what's great is we already showed our bow to our Discord VIP community who's gets the sneak peeks on the book. And already they were talking about the sorts of adventures that they want to send their characters on to help them make this bow. It was, okay, well, we have to kill a banshee, a wraith, we have to kill some high-level undead, and a vampire, the vampire being the big one. And so it kind of tells you already an adventure that you could set them out on.
It's an adventure in scavenger hunt form.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really interesting, is that it's a crafting system that feeds back into what we like doing in D&D. And that's been my biggest problem with, I think, downtime-based crafting systems, is that I'm not playing D&D and crafting something at the same time. I have to stop playing the game and just narrate to my dungeon master what's going on. Whereas this feels like something that really flows with the way the campaign goes. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of things we're going to have to iron out.
Probably. And
Yeah.
this is still in the homebrew workshop, so to speak. We're just sharing it with you while it's in development to tell you the direction we're going.
Yeah.
But I'm excited about seeing the heroes at the end of the campaign who are wearing the cloak of a harpy, carrying the vampire blade, and like the helm of the skull of a demon
helm
lord.
of the beholder.
The helm of the beholder
It's a
with
helmet
a giant
that is like the eye over your, and
and it creates an anti-magic field.
That's a pretty OP item.
Yeah, it is. But this is just silly ideas. But the idea of each of the player characters by the end of the campaign wearing this garb, that when they walk into town, people are like, look at those guys and all the monsters they've killed.
Yeah.
And it's wearing your trophies.
And getting to tell the story of the adventures you've been on in your gear.
And that's what a crafting system should be about, in our opinion.
So tell us what you think of what we've whipped up together. Obviously, we're going to be having many more previews and details on the exact rules that we're working on for Monsters of Drakenheim and this crafting system available through the Kickstarter page. You can check those out. We're going to be having a whole playtest phase with all of our backers as well to collect more feedback and really make sure that this is a well-balanced system. I think, again, the really key thing for me is that this is not an economic simulator. And it isn't intended to be. I don't think we're looking for feedback that is like, this is how you don't break the world. We're just going to go with the session 0 rule here, right?
This is for adventuring parties.
This is for adventuring parties. And I don't want to constrain the design by trying to solve that problem because honestly, I feel like better designers than us have tried and failed to solve that economic problem. And most crafting systems are pretty broken from an economic perspective anyways. So I think we're just going to embrace it and do what feels cool for the way that we actually play D&D.
Also, I'd say make sure to hop onto our VIP Discord, which is for the sneak peeks of the book. We have our patron Discord where we're talking about all that stuff, but for the Kickstarter, we have our VIP Discord where we're actually showcasing some of these elements and getting feedback on them.
It's just $1 to get onto that Discord basically that goes towards your pledge for the Kickstarter. And if you do pledge early, you'll get a free set of really awesome dice if you make a physical pledge.
If you're on our VIP Discord. So let us know what your thoughts are on the system, or if you've used any monster parts to create cool items, talk about it in the comments below. And you can see us playing D&D in our actual play campaign, which airs Tuesday evenings on YouTube. You can check out all the previous episodes right up over here.
Of course, we've got plenty more videos that you can check out where we talk about all the homebrewing that we've done for D&D and TTRPGs over the years. Check them out over here. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time in the dungeon.